Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is a screencast-o-matic presentation and recording for the part of the lesson that has us looking at the cultural geography of East Asia. Before we get started, please let me encourage you to open up to today's lesson and to answer the key concept questions that correspond to the text. Remember that you can replay any part of this presentation that you might need for detail or clarity later. Let's go ahead and get started. The cultural geography of East Asia. Section 1 is population patterns. A geographic view. A torrent of commuters. There seems to be no end to Tokyo's congestion, no time of day when city slackens pace to catch its breath. By 8 a.m., 3 million commuters are coursing through train and subway stations, joining 12 million residents of Tokyo proper on their purposeful way to work. One rush hour morning, I got swept away in a pedestrian torrent, flowing in the opposite direction, and I was carried the distance of a city block. In Japan, as in other parts of East Asia, people are crowded onto relatively small lowland areas along rivers or on seacoasts. There, the largest cities are located. In this section, you will learn about peoples who make up East Asia's population and where East Asians live and why many of them are migrating from rural areas to cities. Human characteristics. East Asia has more than 1.5 billion people, about 25% of the world's population. East Asians form many different ethnic groups, each with its own language and cultural traditions. Among the region's major ethnic groups are the Chinese, the Tibetan, Japanese, Korean, and Mongolian. We're going to talk about China here first. When people in China say someone is Chinese, they use the Chinese word that means a person of the Middle Kingdom. About 92% of China's 1.3 billion people on the Han, an ethnic group named for a powerful ancient Chinese ruling family, from 206 BC to AD 220, Han rulers developed a culture whose influence has lasted to the present. The remaining 8% of China's population belong to about 55 different ethnic groups, most of whom live mainly in western and northern China. Although ruled by China, non-Chinese peoples such as Tibetans have their own separate histories and cultures. For example, the Tibetan homeland of Tibet, located in high Himalayan plateau, was once a Buddhist kingdom. Since China's takeover of Tibet in 1950, the Tibetans have resisted Chinese efforts to destroy their culture. Off China's southeastern coast lies the island of Taiwan. Taiwan and China share a long history, and most of Taiwan's people are descended from Chinese who migrated to the island several hundred years ago. Another 15% of the Taiwanese population descended from Chinese who fled from China to Taiwan in 1949 after the communists in China defeated the nationalist government in a civil war. Taiwan's original inhabitants, or aborigines, are related to the peoples in Southeast Asia and the Pacific area. They make up only about 2% of Taiwan's population. Now we're going to focus on Japan, Korea, and Mongolia. The populations of other East Asian countries have distinct ethnic groups. Japan is ethnically homogeneous, having a population belonging to the same ethnic group, and about 99% of Japan's population is ethnic Japanese, descendants of Asian migrants who crossed the Korean peninsula to reach Japan centuries ago. The migrants forced Japan's earliest known Aboriginal people, the Ainu, to move gradually north. Small numbers of Ainu still live on the island of Hokkaido today. But like Japan, Korea has long been ethnically homogeneous. Koreans trace their origins to early peoples from northern China and Central Asia. They have maintained their common identity despite long periods of foreign rule and today's division of the Korean peninsula into Communist North and Democratic South Korea. The people of Mongolia are mostly ethnic Mongolians, and centuries ago their Mongol ancestors ruled the world's largest land empire, which stretched from China to Eastern Europe. Today the Mongolians are divided into separate linguistic groups, but about 90% of them speak Kalika, Mongolian language. Where East Asians live. Physical geography influences where East Asians live because much of East Asia is barren and mountainous. The region's population is distributed unevenly, and most East Asians settle in coastal areas on the fertile areas along rivers. In these places, among the most densely populated on Earth, the land and climate are favorable for agriculture, industry, and urban growth. Population distribution and density. Despite China's large land area, more than 90% of Chinese live on only 1/6 of the land. Most inhabit the fertile valleys and plains of China's three great rivers, the Yellow River, or Huanghe, the Yangtze River, or Changjiang, and the Xi. Large urban centers such as Shanghai, Beijing, Tianjin, and Guangzhou lie in river valleys in the coastal plains. They have populations ranging from 6 million to more than 13.5 million, and by contrast, the rugged western province of Jiangxing has a separate population of farmers and herders living on scattered oases. About 2.5 million people live in Mongolia's vast interior steppes, a population density of only 4 people per square mile. Space is limited in Taiwan, and where most of the island's 22 million people live in cities such as Taipei, that lie on closer to the coast. In North and South Korea, most people inhabit coastal plains that wrap around the Korean peninsula's mountainous interior. About two-thirds of Korean population lives in rapidly growing cities such as Seoul and Pyongyang. Japan has limited land area for its large population, and forested mountains cover the central part of the country, leaving only valleys and coastal plains for settlement. About 78% of Japan's 126.7 million people live in coastal urban areas such as the Tokaido Corridor, which is a series of cities crowded together on the main island of Honshu. Of these cities, Tokyo is the world's most populous urban area, with more than 28 million people. By contrast, Japan's northernmost large island, Hokkaido, remains rural with few people. Now let's go ahead and talk about culture. Japan's urban lifestyle. Urbanization shapes the physical surroundings and lifestyles of Japanese people. Hundreds of skyscrapers tower over the busy streets of Japan's modern cities. Glaring neon lights advertise cars, electronics, and watches, as in most of East Asia's crowded cities. A childless couple might live in a tiny 1 or 2 bedroom apartment because of Japan's high population density and costly land. Suburban homes are small compared to those in other developed countries. The Japanese have adapted to their crowded conditions with an efficient transportation system. Commuters board the Shinkansen Express or bullet train to get to their destinations, and as the electric train pulls out of the station, its movement gently presses passengers back into their seats, and in a few moments, the train reaches speeds of up to 160 miles per hour. Along the Tokaido Corridor, the westbound train cruises from Tokyo through the urban, industrial areas of Nagoya, Osaka, and Kobe, to Fukaku and the island of Kyushu, 604 miles away. A trip that takes more than 11 hours of hectic driving and delays by car takes only about 5 hours by high-speed train. And the last section of our reading here pertained to migration and challenges of growth. In recent decades, many people in China and South Korea have moved from rural desert or mountainous areas to cities. Although most Chinese still live and work on farms, millions of people continue to migrate to high-growth urban areas. Many are especially drawn to southeastern China, where China's communist government allows privately owned businesses in Hong Kong and in special economic zones. For factories in these special zones, the arrival of migrants means plenty of available labor, as one observer notes here. These Walai Gangren, literally external coming workers, outnumber the Dongan population, with more arriving all the time. When I need workers, a sweater factory manager said, I just put a sign outside the gate. In South Korea, many people also have moved from rural areas seeking industrial jobs in coastal cities. Politics, however, has affected migration on the Korean peninsula. To escape communism, many people in the mid-1900s fled from North Korea to South Korea or to other countries, especially the United States and Canada, seeking political and economic freedom. Today, South Korea has 48.8 million people, more than twice as many as North Korea, where the standard of living is much lower. And here's the last section on challenges of growth. Population changes and increasing urbanization have brought challenges to East Asia. In China and South Korea, for example, the steady migration from rural villages to cities has led to urban overcrowding. This population shift has contributed to farm labor shortages in the countryside, to stem migration from rural areas to already overcrowded urban areas. China, for example, has built dozens of new agricultural towns in remote areas. These towns are designed to provide more social services and better equality for life of rural people. The Chinese government hopes that the benefits of the new towns will encourage people to stay on their farms. But ever-growing populations in East Asia have put a strain on the limited resources and services. Some of East Asia's governments see population control as another way to meet the challenges of population growth. In 1979, China began a policy that allowed each family to have no more than one child. Although not followed by all Chinese, the one-child policy until recently had been a factor in slowing China's population growth rate. Now that policy is no longer strictly enforced, and China's population growth rate is increasing once again. Statistics presented in the population pyramid of China on page 662 suggest that a higher birth rate is largely responsible for the increased population growth rate. Population changes will continue to play an important part in East Asia's future. In the next section, you will learn about the values and traditions that sustain East Asians as they face the many challenges of the future. Thank you very much for tuning in, and good luck with completing the rest of the lesson.